Okay, you are now live.
Good afternoon. I'm Gwen Whistler. I'm the chair of the Planning and Economic Development Committee, and I'd like to welcome you to our January 11th meeting. All council members and staff are participating virtually. We appreciate your patience as we work through these committee meetings a bit differently. To help our audience follow along, I'll state each section of the agenda aloud. We are streaming live on our virtual engagement hub, which is accessible through the virtual engagement hub link on the front page of the city's website. We also have an option for the public to listen live by phone by dialing 855-925-2801 and entering the code 8187. For those of you out there with us today, welcome. For today's meeting, we have the option for people to call in and comment live during the meeting. To call in and comment, use the same number, 855-925-2801, meeting code 8187. Your phone will be muted and you will hear the meeting live. At this point, callers will hear, for more options, please press star. Pressing star will allow callers to continue to listen live and join a speaker queue. If you are watching the meeting through the live stream while you are listening to the meeting by phone, please be sure to turn down the volume on your device. I'll now go through and introduce all committee members and staff who are participating virtually. Please make sure to mute your microphone if you are not speaking. When you would like to speak, unmute your microphone. And if you want to speak, sometimes it's easier if you raise your hand so I can see. And then when you're done speaking, please mute your microphone again. So council and staff, as I call your name, please say a quick hello. Councilwoman Sandra Kilgore.
Hello, here.
Councilwoman Sage Turner.
Hello, nice to be here.
Assistant City Manager Kathy Ball.
Good afternoon.
Planning and Urban Design, Todd Okolachaney.
Hi, everyone.
And Planning and Urban Design, Stacy Merton.
Hi, everyone. This is Stacy.
Okay, great. So we'll go ahead and start the committee agenda. So we have you should have all gotten a copy of the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the November minutes?
I could motion, but I wasn't there. So how does that work?
You still make the motion.
I'll move.
And I'll second.
Lovely. So so I'm going to clue you in. I'm going to vote okay, and I was at the meeting. So I'm going to roll call vote to approve the motion and the second. When I say your name, please say aye or nay to approve the minutes. Councilwoman Kilgore?
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner?
Aye.
And I will also approve. So the minutes have been approved. So the next item is, we only have one item on the agenda. It's the hotel development update. So I'm going to ask Todd Okolachaney to kick this off. It's yours, Todd.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Todd Okolachaney, Planning and Urban Design Director. I just want to note also that Paul D'Angelo from our Community and Economic Development Department has also joined us just to assist with any housing-related questions for the public benefits table. The purpose of today's presentation really is to just provide you all with an update of where we're at with the hotel development standards. In particular, we've made a number of different changes since we held 2 city council work sessions in October of last year. And we also have several items for discussion that we'd like to hear your input on. I will now pull up the presentation if you just give me a moment.
I'm happy to do that, Todd.
Okay, thank you, Kathy.
This is Kathy.
And Kathy, if you go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So just a reminder, if you weren't able to attend or see the council work sessions back in October, we had several key takeaways that we just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of. Throughout we're almost approaching that 1.5 years for the end of our development moratorium on hotels, which expires on February 23rd. We started this process back in September of 2019. And some of our findings from this development study for hotels is that hotels can't be banned necessarily outright. That the findings from the Urban Land Institute and city staff were that development impacts of hotel development can be managed. And the way we're proposing to better manage impacts of hotels is through the creation of several new innovative tools that we'll cover in a moment. Next slide, please. There are three key elements to our hotel development new regulations, which include the creation of a new hotel overlay district and new development standards for hotels, public benefits, and the third key element is a revised design review process. In total, if you kind of recall what the new development process would look like under this proposal, what staff is essentially proposing is a more straightforward and predictable development review process. We would ask an applicant who submits a hotel application whether or not they are located in our new hotel overlay district. And if they are, we would go through a series of review criteria to establish how that proposal would be reviewed, whether that would be at a city staff level or city council level. If you recall, if a hotel is located in our hotel overlay district map, and if that hotel meets all of our development standards, and if that application includes a certain number of public benefits, such as affordable housing and living wages and other options, and if that proposal is under our thresholds for what triggers city council review, then it would be reviewed and approved at a city staff level. And that's really the big change with this new development review process. The other way that a proposal would be reviewed by city council would be through our conditional zoning process. And that would be our other option here. If a hotel application doesn't meet any of those standards or criteria that I mentioned, or if that hotel is located somewhere outside of our hotel overlay district map. The reason we're proposing these new key elements is really to leverage that development to meet community needs. We feel that this is a big improvement over our current development review process, in which currently all hotels come before city council. Staff has made a number of revisions to our public benefits table, which we'll review in a little bit, and we'll cover what some of those changes are. We feel that the public benefits table has been beefed up, if you will, so that we think we can get more public benefits and more community benefits than we have under our current process for hotels. Next slide, please. So for the first item or key element, we'll just review the hotel overlay map and some of the changes that we've made to that map since our council work sessions in October. Next slide, please. This was that development review process that I briefly alluded to during this presentation. We tried to simplify the development review flow chart so that we only have two options for a new hotel application. Again, we would ask the question or review the application for a new hotel project to determine whether or not it's located in our new hotel overlay district area, which is essentially a new zoning district. The applicant would then submit an application and they would follow the flow process shown on the left-hand side of the screen in green. And we would ask whether or not the project complies, again, with the development standards that are found in our Unified Development Ordinance, otherwise known as our zoning code or zoning regulations. We would also analyze that project to see if it is meeting our threshold for the number of public benefits that we're asking for. we would have a new design review body review the project and provide a recommendation as to the design of the project. And we would also review the project to make sure that it is under our city council thresholds, which I'll review on the next slide. If the answer is no to any of these different criteria, automatically that would trigger a city council review, which is shown on the right-hand side of the screen. And that would be through our conditional zoning process.
Todd?
Yes.
If say a hotel, a proposed hotel was not in the hotel overlay district, so it immediately came to conditional zoning, will council be able to apply the standards in approving that conditional zoning that the public benefits and the public benefits apply those standards for the conditional zoning? Or
at that point, those standards would only be an option or something that could be negotiated with or amongst city council members and the applicant. I think the public benefits table and any of these standards, in my view, would be a good guide, possibly to help mitigate any impacts of that project, but they would not be required. So any of those public benefits or any other standards would have to be negotiated amongst city council and the applicant.
Okay, thank you.
Next slide, please.
Todd, I'm sorry, I have a follow-up question to Gwen's because I had the same question. So as I understand it, right now we have a couple problems with the conditional zoning approval of hotels, and that is in an enforcement thereafter capacity. Is that correct? And if so, to Gwen's point, so say a larger hotel comes in than any of the room numbers or is not in the zone, are we going to run into that same issue where we go through a conditional zoning process, they are or not approved by council, but then in the end we have a lack of enforcement?
In terms of enforcement, as you know, when a project comes before city council, there's a list of conditions, which we call our B1 conditions, and that essentially becomes part of that development approval. Even at a staff level review, any of the public benefits or anything that the developer agrees to, that would have to still be reviewed at a staff level to make sure that the applicant is complying with all of the aspects of their application and what they are saying they're going to do. If they are unable to meet any of the public benefits, for example, that they say that they are trying to achieve, then ultimately, from an enforcement perspective, the city would not issue a final zoning permit or may not issue a final certificate of occupancy. That we would have several triggers or kind of baked into the process to make sure we don't get too far. That we want to make sure that everything that the developer is saying they're going to do, that we have several checks and balances to make sure that they try to comply with that.
Thank you.
So as a reminder, we do have several existing thresholds and some new thresholds that we're proposing for even if a project complies with all the public benefits and is located in somewhere on the hotel overlay district map area, that there are still several thresholds that would automatically trigger that city council review. That includes hotels exceeding 100 feet in height. That would also include a mixed use project that may have a hotel and maybe residential integrated into it, for example. We also have a new threshold, or just a threshold that we've had that's part of our proposal, that says that if a hotel that's over 115 rooms, that would also trigger city council review. There was a lot of discussion at the city council work sessions back in October about, what is that magic number for the threshold? There were some council members that expressed an interest in possibly lowering that number to somewhere around 100 rooms. After city staff looked at the kind of the development trends for hotels over the last 10 years, especially, we found that a majority of hotels, over 50% of them are 100 rooms or less. We felt that around the 115 room level would still capture some larger hotels that council may be interested in reviewing. But our goal here was not to ensure that every project still comes before city council. That was not the goal of the kind of this overall proposal that staff has, nor was that a recommendation from the Urban Land Institute. If council is interested in reviewing all hotels, then that threshold could be lowered from 115 rooms. But at this time, city staff is proposing the 115 rooms as a trigger for city council review. And we feel that it's something that we would, if were approved by council ultimately, we could come back to city council possibly 1 year later or 2 years later. And we generally try to evaluate how these new zoning proposals are working and make any adjustments, as needed. That's staff's recommendation, right now, but certainly that threshold of how many rooms triggers council review, certainly open to discussion or any feedback that you all have on that. I think ultimately, if we lower that number, it's possible you could see some smaller hotels, but we also feel like there's kind of a sweet spot somewhere between 100 and 115 rooms, where once you get any lower than that, it's likely that most, if not all, hotel applications would come before council. So we feel like if we lower that number, it might mean council's still reviewing a lot of hotels, whereas our goal of this project was to create a more predictable and transparent development process. Going back to the hotel overlay map, if you'd like to, we could pull up the map. If not, I could just walk through some of the changes that we've made from the council work sessions in October. And these were outlined in the staff report as well. We did reduce the area where large hotels could be permitted. We removed the Asheville Mall area from the hotel overlay district until new zoning amendments are adopted for the urban place or urban centers rezoning proposal. We've removed the River Ridge Shopping Center area. We've removed some areas in the eastern part of downtown near the Bowcatcher Tunnel, which is east of South Charlotte Street between Woodfin and College Streets. So that kind of eastern area of the downtown, that's a little bit closer to the East End neighborhood. We've removed that area. We did expand one small area in South Slope for small hotels, and that's on the west side of Cox Avenue in the southern end of the South Slope. And Councilmember Turner, I see a hand raised.
Why did you pull the River Ridge? I'm curious.
I think, again, there was just some concern about maybe the proximity of residential zoning districts to that. And in the future, it's possible through the urban centers rezoning that we might be able to take a deeper dive and look into that area. The first phase of our urban centers proposal would look at 3 different nodes in the city along Merriman Avenue, near the Steinmart and Ingalls, the Innsbrook Mall area on Tunnel Road, and then the Walmart area on Bleachery Boulevard. But as part of a second phase, we have an opportunity to look at some additional areas, possibly River Ridge, the Asheville Mall, and the former Kmart site on Patton Avenue.
Just as a general comment, I am amazed and greatly appreciate how much progress you have made on this map. As someone that started looking at it maybe a year ago when the first maps came out. This is a significant reduction in overall area for these hotels. And I've been able to go out and drive around and look at these spots and weigh it. And I just wanted to say thank you for the extensive updates to this map.
Absolutely, and we appreciate that. And a lot of that based on council and community feedback was really instrumental in our boards and commissions in making these changes.
Todd, and I echo what Sage said. I mean, you've been, this has been a lot of work and a lot of great input. Relative to when we say the hotel overlay district represents less than 8% of total acreage, of that 8%, well, so I'm asking two questions. One, of the 8% that we've identified that are in the hotel overlay district, how much already are hotels? And then how much acreage right now is used by hotels that are outside the hotel overlay district? And I guess I have a third question now that I think about it is and if there's a hotel right now that's outside the hotel overlay district, and say, for example, it burnt down and they wanted to build a new hotel, or something happened and they wanted a new hotel, would someone be allowed to build a new hotel in a replacement situation?
Okay, so I'll back up and starting with the first question about the 8% and what that entails. If you recall, if we go back, maybe I'll go back 5 years, hotels used to be permitted in basically within all of our commercial districts. So about 5 years ago, hotels were permitted in a lot more areas of the city than they are today, or were just before the moratorium. I want to say it was in 2018 when council made changes to any zoning map changes for our hotels, where hotels were then restricted to just being allowed in our resort district, our resort zoning district, which only includes a very limited number of parcels in the city, such as the Crown Plaza Hotel property and the Grove Park Inn. My understanding, when that change was made, it was a reaction to what's happening over the last 10 years with all the hotel development we've been experiencing as a city. And then obviously that was followed up and preceded by our hotel development moratorium. So under the new proposal, we are recommending that we increase where hotels are permitted compared to how they are today, because they're only allowed in the resort district. But again, I would really preface that by saying, or add some more context to that when that change was made to reduce hotels to only the resort district, in my view, that was not a permanent fix. That was kind of a Band-Aid and reaction to what was happening. The other question about...
Well, and to follow up on that, frankly, council didn't really stop the development of hotels. We just kept approving hotels. It was just everything had to go through conditional zoning. There weren't guardrails around it. So
that's correct. Yeah, even on a zoning map, it again, going back to that first slide, is no matter what, we can't just ban hotels outright. That there's still a process, no matter what, even if this doesn't change and we have the same development review process, that through conditional zoning, that's always an option for any property owner in the city to ask for that option. And Councilmember Turner.
Wait a minute, you didn't answer my questions.
Yeah, and I'm going to echo Gwen's questions and add another layer of, I would love to see that data. And I guess what I heard her say was, how much do hotels, whether they're in the districts that we're proposing or not, currently occupy? And then as a total of all, including those outside these approved zones, what are they? And I would personally also like to know the acreage and the tax productivity.
We may need to get back, this is Kathy Ball, Chair, and we may need to get back with you on that information. We've captured your questions, but we can provide you that data.
Thank you, Kathy. The last question, I believe, was related to what happens if you have I guess what we would call a legal non-conforming use or building that that is hit by lightning or a hurricane happens. Can it be rebuilt? We have I'd say we have a very actually stringent non-conformity section currently in our zoning regulations today that does not allow, in many cases, a pre-existing legal non-conforming use to be reconstructed. This is something that we've been looking into as part of our urban centers rezoning, and we do have some draft language prepared that would where staff is recommending some changes to that language to allow a non-conforming use or building to be reconstructed under certain circumstances. So that is something that we have been evaluating as part of the urban centers rezoning. I'm not sure that we're prepared to present that as part of this overall hotel proposal, but something that we could look into if there's interest.
I'm sorry that I didn't fully understand that jargon, but I basically just want to know if Red Roof Inn or Days Inn, whatever hotel on some road somewhere in the city decides they would like to rebuild to be a nicer, newer hotel, but they're outside the zone. I would like to know at a future date if they would be allowed. I didn't understand.
So that would trigger in that situation that would be a conditional zoning because the property is located outside of the hotel overlay district map. Yeah, and I apologize that a legal non-conforming use. I'm trying not to use this word. It's I think not a commonly accepted word anymore. But grandfathered would be kind of in layman's terms what a legal non-conforming use or building would be.
But we're not going to use that expression anymore.
Any other questions about that, or we could move to the next slide? And again, as Kathy mentioned, we'll get back to you with answers to your other questions. So here's a good slide now to kind of take a step back and discuss some of the other what we feel are sort of outstanding considerations. If you may recall at the council work sessions in October, we did discuss the possibility of adding a separation requirement between new hotels and even existing hotels, so that if a new hotel is developed, that hotel can't be located within X number of feet of another property that has a hotel. The hotel map that we prepared, if you go to take a look at that online, we do have 2 layers, like GIS layers on that hotel map that shows what a 100-foot buffer and 200-foot buffer would look like. Staff looked at this pretty extensively, and for a number of reasons, staff is not recommending a separation requirement at this time. Instead, we really tried to focus on the hotel overlay district map as being the tool that we use to help guide where future hotels may or may not be appropriate in the city. I think some of the unintended consequences of having a separation requirement, it does start to exclude any new hotels from being built in some areas, such as Tunnel Road. If you included, for example, a 200-foot separation between properties on Tunnel Road, it basically excludes any of those properties from being allowed to have a new hotel in the future. We also think with the separation requirement, it does create some market volatility that a developer might buy a piece of property intending to build a hotel, and their neighbor could then build or get an approved hotel next to them, and it creates some uncertainty there. But the main thing is there is some concern from staff that by having a separation requirement, developers could potentially purchase certain properties and hold on to them to prevent a hotelier from building anything on there. And the unintended consequence there is that that property then wouldn't be built for anything, whether that's housing or any other use. Instead, what staff is recommending as a way to address the separation requirement is that we have the ability to update the Living Asheville Comprehensive Plan with language that, or a recommendation or a strategy that could say something like clustering of hotels is not preferred or not recommended, and that would provide an additional tool for City Council if a hotel came before you as a conditional zoning. That could be a recommendation from the comp plan that could be used as a way to help inform you in your decision whether or not to approve any particular hotel application that comes before you. So we think that we can address the separation requirement through the Living Asheville Comprehensive Plan rather than having an actual standard that's codified as part of the UDO. And again, this is it's a staff recommendation. We realize there is still, maybe some hesitancy from some council members on this. In recent discussions also with council members at council member check-ins, at least one member expressed one of their concerns regarding the separation requirement, or the reason why they wanted it, is because there was a concern that a short-term vacation rental hotel, which is kind of a newer product out there where you have a hotel that's under one ownership, but that the model acts as a model for that development, still acts like it's a short-term vacation rental, where individual guest rooms are advertised on various platforms such as Airbnb. There was a concern that product, that we might get a lot of small short-term vacation rental hotels, which our UDO defines that as a hotel extended stay, and that we would get more horizontal development of hotels and get kind of one after another. When staff looked more into this, what I could say is that we do define this particular use, a short-term vacation rental hotel. We define it differently than how we define a small or large hotel in the city within our UDO. A hotel extended stay only pertains to these short-term vacation rental type hotel products, or an extended stay type hotel where you have a kitchen and you have some additional amenities in that unit, but that only applies to 21 or more guest rooms. So right now, that hotel extended stay use, which is 21 or more hotel rooms, staff is recommending that only be permitted in areas in the overlay district map that allow the large hotels, which is 35 or more rooms. So we would recommend that short-term vacation rental hotel model only be permitted in areas in the hotel overlay district that allow large hotels, and that any smaller type short-term vacation rental hotel unit, which again we define as a hotel extended stay currently, that those would only be allowed in our resort zoning district. What that means is we may not have a definition today for a smaller STVR hotel type of product, and we would not recommend adding that as a permitted use anywhere outside of the resort district. Hopefully, I've tried my best to explain that. But if you have any questions, which I think you may, I'm happy to answer them about that particular use.
Okay, so don't give me the justification. Don't start there. Just say what you're proposing.
Okay. What we are proposing is that for this particular land use type, which I think in layman's terms, someone might call it a short-term vacation rental hotel, which is kind of a mashup of a short-term vacation rental and a hotel, that we would only allow that use at 21 or more rooms in areas identified on the hotel overlay map as allow a large hotel in those same areas that allow a large hotel. And that for a smaller type of that same use would only be permitted in our resort district. And I think that is one way to kind of respond to concerns that some council members have about that use becoming proliferated throughout the city. That's one way for us to address regulating that type of land use within the city without having a separation requirement.
Todd, how does this roll over into, I believe we had an applicant that maybe withdrew, proposed a condo project with approximately 20 condos that was ultimately really just a hotel that had a management office designed into the building to manage the condos. Where is that in this legal discussion of what that is?
Again, I'm trying to go back and think about all the parameters of that. It's possible we would have defined that as this hotel extended stay, which is 21 or more rooms, under single management, but each room has a kitchen and almost acts like a dwelling unit or an extended stay hotel that has these additional amenities within each unit. We do have a separate definition for short-term vacation rentals, but that really only applies to individually owned units that are being rented and a smaller type of building and that has a smaller number of short-term vacation rentals. But basically, once you start getting into a larger number of these types of units, we start to define it differently as a hotel extended stay, which is only 21 or more rooms.
And just to clarify, so if someone wanted to create one short-term vacation rental, you're still disallowed from doing that without express permission from council, right? This doesn't change that. Okay.
That's correct. Shannon's on the line too, but my understanding is that we only allow those smaller short-term vacation rentals, or even just one short-term vacation rental. We only allow that in the resort district today, and nowhere else.
Okay, so can I restate and just so that I see if I understand? Basically, if it is a room that has a kitchen and other amenities like that, anything smaller than 21 number of rooms owned by one owner is only allowed in the resort area. Anything with 21 or more rooms will only be allowed in the large hotel overlay district.
That's correct.
Yeah, we may want to work on that understanding, but yeah, okay, I get it.
Well, particularly how it ties to some of the recent initiatives around the short rentals, the kitchen, homestays, et cetera, because some of that language included that everyone could have one, a legal entity could have one, an LLC could have one. So in that case, this condo idea of 20 rooms that have kitchens and maybe doesn't have the management office, but had that homestay ordinance continue to move forward, does it continue to move forward, then we would come back to this problem where we'd have a condo building of 20 condos, each allowed to have owners in the short-term rental. I'm not asking a question, just tying the two together for our awareness.
And Shannon, I see you're logged on. I wasn't sure if you were trying to respond.
I'm happy to. Councilwoman Turner said it wasn't really a question, but the condominium buildings, individually owned units, can only be classified as short-term vacation rentals. And even to do a CZ for one of those would be challenging because it requires every single owner to participate in the application. So we run a much lower risk of having like an existing condominium building converted into some sort of short-term vacation rental hotel. And we're working on a second definition for something less than a fewer number of units than a extended stay hotel. I'm playing around with terms right now, short-term vacation apartment, something like that. So for those projects that are like 16 units, 12 units, 18 units, whatever it is, will be defined differently, and it will only be allowed in the resort district, as Todd said.
Todd, would you like council members to weigh in about the separation requirement and this other issue, or are we just nodding and gonna, whether we decide going forward to recommend this to council?
Absolutely. I'll leave that up to you all. If there's any additional feedback you want to provide to staff to help us as we kind of move this proposal through our process here, we definitely would welcome that if you have any thoughts at this time.
So Chair Whistler, we are not looking for a recommendation today. This is just for discussion purposes and for feedback from you all. So there will be another opportunity, but we are not asking you to make a recommendation today. So I think it would be helpful to get feedback from what we propose. If y'all want to do it at the time that that Todd covers the items, we would be happy to take it.
Okay. Well, I mean, from my personal perspective, I'm the logic, et cetera, on the separation requirement and the small hotels versus this conversation about short-term vacation rentals. I'm good with the direction staff is going in right now.
I am as well, and I understand the concern from the other council member, but I almost appreciate them being grouped together in clusters in some ways, because I think that helps. At some point we will have hotel rooms. I know that seems far away right now, but we will hit a mark when no other hotels want to build here, and this kind of keeps it from continuing to push into neighborhoods.
Councilwoman Kilgore, do you want to weigh in, or you don't need to, but.
Well, no, only I did have a question when Shannon was on, when she was talking about individual units that's in a condo building as far as homestays. I just needed some clarification on that.
So a condominium building allows for each unit to be individually owned. So that doesn't meet the definition of a hotel, because a hotel is under, it's all the units or all of the rooms are under one management group. So when you have a condominium building, if you've got 20 condo units, you've got 20 owners. So each unit is considered, if they want it to be short-term, it's considered a short-term vacation rental. And those would not be allowed in the downtown. Or
Okay.
in most districts, except for a resort.
And that was the reason I was questioning that, because they do have some downtown that are actually have conditional permits that are actually doing short-term vacation rentals. So I'm trying to figure out what sort of, how do you regulate that? And the reason I'm asking is just that I do know a building right downtown that they do have, some of the ones do have permits in there. And one of the clients just asked me, he said, Sandra, the neighbor on this side has a permit. They do short-term vacation rentals, and the other one on the other side. And he was asking me, what did he need to do to get a permit? So that's the reason I wanted some clarification on exactly how does that work.
So in those particular instances, I think those are probably, if those are projects that have come online relatively recently, those are probably projects that got permitted prior to the restriction on short-term vacation rentals. So we used to allow them downtown, and a number of projects included short-term vacation rentals in their residential projects. So anything that was permitted prior to the rule change is allowed to continue. So,
Okay.
and at that time, we had a lot of them during a short period of time when we allowed, where anything 21 or more rooms became a CZ, but anything less was allowed. So that's why you see these projects that not all of the units are short-term vacation rentals, only like 20 of them or 10 of them, or, it was different with different projects. They are required to get an annual permit, and we monitor them through that annual permit process.
So basically, you're not taking on any new ones. It's just the ones that are presently there. Okay.
That's right.
Thank you. For ready to move along, we'll now focus and discuss the public benefits table and some of the changes that have been made to that table. Next slide, please. Just a quick recap. Staff has been working with the community over the last several months on developing a table or a matrix or a rubric of various public benefits with, depending upon the level of benefit and how impactful it is to the community, has a certain number of points assigned to it. And essentially what we're recommending is that for hotels, depending upon the size of the hotel and where that hotel is located, whether it's located in what we're calling an urban area, which includes the downtown or central business district, River Arch District, and Biltmore Village, that hotel projects located in those areas would be required to meet a higher point threshold. Hotels located in what we're calling suburban areas, which is every other area of the city, would be required to meet still a high level of points, but less than hotels that would be located in those urban areas, such as downtown. And we've made a lot of adjustments to our public benefits table based on feedback that we've received from council members in the community. Some of those changes is that we've increased the contribution amounts that an applicant would have to provide if they chose one of our affordable housing options, where we have different options for contributing money to the city's affordable housing trust fund. We've increased those. In some cases, we've doubled that amount. And we now have higher options for those affordable housing options, where it's up to a $6,000 contribution per room. So for example, a 100-room hotel, if an applicant chose that option, would have to provide $600,000 to the Housing Trust Fund. So we've increased all those contributions to the Housing Trust Fund, and we've adjusted some of the points that would be allocated for some of the green building LEED certification. There's a lot of discussion at the council work session about the fact that there are hotels that are already including some green building elements into their design. So we want to acknowledge that and make sure that we were also prioritizing other council priorities, such as affordable housing, in the table. We've also added two new options for supporting or contracting with minority and women-owned business enterprises. We have two options for that. One is a financial contribution to support minority and women-owned business enterprises in the city. And the other one is a public benefit option where one would contract with an MWBE during the construction phase of the project. We worked on those with our Community and Economic Development Department. In terms of the point system, before I move on to the next slide, I will get to some of the recommendations from council, but if you have any questions, I'll take these.
Quick question. And I think this goes to one of the things that Councilwoman Turner asked before. Most of these criteria, that it kind of is determined when the hotel is built. But like living wages, how do you monitor that after the hotel is built? And what is the ramification if a hotel ceased to comply with something like that it's sort of an ongoing promise, not necessarily something that, something that either is or is not there before a certificate of occupancy. I really only see the transportation benefit and the living wages as a public benefit that probably is more ongoing. But how would that be addressed? I'm not being very articulate. I apologize.
No, I understand completely. I think it depends. As you mentioned, for some of these public benefits, we do have definitions for some of these that might provide some more guidance. Some of these we might require like a letter of certification or something like that. But I think it's similar to when we go through a conditional zoning process and we have conditions for a project that something like living wages, obviously, as you mentioned, great example of something that continues beyond the entitlement phase of the project. It basically continues well into the future as a business is up and running. If we found that something like that was not being met, we do have through zoning enforcement, we would have the opportunity to issue a notice of violation and then go through our code enforcement process. That's the main tool that I can think of. Brad, if you have any other input on this, please feel free to.
Introducing our city attorney, Brad Grant.
Thank you for the introduction, Madam Chair. And I would echo what our planning director has said in that given the circumstances in this proposal, what you are essentially doing is creating these conditions that have the same force and effect, but they are implemented through a system of instead of our normal conditions, B1 conditions as part of the zoning. This is an incentive process. So they are incentives, but they are part of a mutually arrived upon agreement whereby they become inherent in the zoning itself. And therefore, we would obviously look to members of the public, members within that own business, employees to help us with notification on these things, specifically regarding living wages. But I think we would enforce it through the standard zoning process, which is a well-established and effective tool.
Thank you.
If we could go to the next slide, we did. Sorry.
Councilwoman Turner has a question.
Thank you. I just have it's not an exhaustive list, 5 or 6 questions about this rubric. First off, I've noticed 2 things have disappeared from the rubric that were on there in earlier months, one of which was the requirement to have a shuttle. And I'm not sure if this next one ever got onto the rubric list, but it has been something I've been vocal about the entire 18 months, and that is the ground floor activation. I don't know unless I'm missing something. I'm also looking at a rubric that has a different urban and non-urban scoring point system, which I'm not familiar with and hadn't seen before. So I would love to know if we're still looking at the shuttle, if we're still talking about the ground floor activation, and if not, why not? I'm also curious. I know another counselor had shared that they were very interested in having reparations fund listed as an option. I'd like to echo and support them in that. And then I would like to understand why we chose just for sale housing. I saw Paul is on here, so maybe he'll be able to speak to that versus a for rent option. And lastly, I think we will probably need a definition of inclusive hiring if we're going to say it, because I'm not sure what that means to us. That was a lot of questions. Sorry.
Great. No problem. If we can actually, Kathy, move to the next. I'm sorry. I have a slide where I outline some of this, but a lot of these things. But we could discuss it now, maybe since we're on that other slide. That to clarify, the urban versus suburban area is something we've had in the table since early on in this, where we were always kind of recommending that for hotels, especially in the downtown versus other areas, that we might want to hold those hotels to a higher standard due to land costs and other potential impacts on those areas that might require a greater level of public benefits to offset any potential impacts of the project. I know Stacy Merton's on the line. I'm trying to think through maybe some of the history of the public benefits table and looking at the shuttle or ground floor activation, that might be something, Stacy, if you're able to assist on.
Yes, hang on just a second.
The short answer, this is Kathy Ball, is that the shuttle and the ground floor are included in the development requirements. So it is required as part of the review. So therefore, there would be no points associated with doing it because you have to do it in order to get the approval of the hotel. Is that correct, Stacey?
That is correct. That's right. I'm not sure about, I was going to go back and check the shuttle. I know definitely the ground floor activation is part of the development requirements.
Shuttle is included still.
Okay.
We debated whether it should be in the development requirements versus the public benefits. And for better or for worse, it landed in the development requirements. Ground floor activation is also required in both the CBD and the River Arts districts.
And ground floor activation, define it, like their lobby or other retail commercial spaces?
It says, I'll read it for you. It says for buildings with a greater than 50 buildings that are greater than 50 feet wide and when located in the central business district and River Arts Farm Code areas, a minimum of 50% of the street facing facade shall be set aside as separate occupiable storefronts and must have their own public entrance from the street. Where multiple facades face a public street, the 50% minimum may be aggregated.
Wow, did that happen recently, Shannon?
No, that's been in there.
No, it's been in there. Yeah.
Wow, okay, thank you.
I think that folks have been paying so much attention to the table and not so much to the standards themselves that maybe that got overlooked previously.
Okay, and 50 feet wide is pretty narrow. I mean, we're not seeing more narrow hotels. I mean, that's pretty small. Okay. That makes sense.
The 50 feet was because we do sometimes see, we've had a number of inquiries about projects where they really almost just have like a small entrance, like a very small storefront, and then you kind of enter and go down almost like a narrow lobby and then up into the hotel. So we wanted to make sure that if it was a viable storefront space, that was included.
You know, it reminds me, I know the 72 Create project withdrew or something, but they had moved their lobby to the top floor so that the ground floor could be as active for the community as possible. And just sharing that in case that's something we want to look into as far as point worthiness.
And Todd, as far as the reparations go, were you going to talk about that? Because we have discussed adding that now as well.
Yes, thank you. So this is a very important option, obviously a priority for council and the community. Initially we did not include the reparations fund option in our initial table because we didn't have a reparations policy yet established with the city. But after discussing this more among staff and with council members, we've added or we are looking at adding reparation fund options to the table. Again, recognizing this is a priority for the community, but I would just kind of add some more caveat to that is that until we have a policy as a city, if this is approved and an applicant chooses to contribute money to the reparations fund, it will sit in that fund until we've established a policy of how to distribute those funds in the future. So I just want to make sure everyone's very clear about that. But the reparations fund, what we're looking at for options is similar monetary contributions to the higher level affordable housing options. So for example, we might have like a $4,000 per room and a $6,000 per room option, similar to the affordable housing, the higher level affordable housing options. Again, at $6,000 per room, that would yield something like 180 points, which is all or most of the points you need to meet the public benefits point threshold. But at a 100-room hotel at $6,000 per room, that would be a $600,000 contribution. So we think that's a pretty sizable public benefit that could go to that reparations fund. The way we would define that fund in reparations, we would tie it back to the reparations resolution that was passed by City Council last year. And there were some questions too from Councilmember Turner about adding some additional affordable housing options to the table. Some of those options included building affordable rental housing. Since the last council work session, we had added 2 options pertaining to building affordable for sale housing as part of the development of a hotel development. And that was at 80% area median income or equivalent for a for sale unit. Staff was proposing to address the rental affordable housing. We were trying to really focus on the city's housing trust fund as a way of addressing subsidized affordable rental housing. That we have several options, I believe 5 options for a monetary contribution to our housing trust fund, which helps to support rental affordable housing at various affordability levels. We have, in the last 5 years, actually, I think a higher level or higher majority of housing trust fund dollars that have gone to projects at 60% AMI or lower. We've had some at 80% AMI and some at 30% area median income. Staff's rationale is to try to keep the housing trust fund as the option in our table to address affordable rental housing. And that would be a way for us for our community economic development department to continue to manage those funds and bring those projects to council, as needed when those funds are distributed through the housing trust fund. And then also that, the housing trust fund, we feel does meet certain affordability levels. And by having an option to contribute to that fund would help to sustain that program in the city. That housing trust fund program does have a finite number of dollars in it to help support it. And this would be one way of sustaining that program. I think building affordable housing into a hotel project also has some land use concerns that some of the amenities of if you think of like a luxury hotel with affordable housing mixed into it, some of those amenities may not be things that someone living in an affordable unit are looking for. They're not looking for room service and other things that you might find in a luxury condo and hotel mix, like in the Eris building, for example, has these for sale condo units with hotels mixed into that project. But again, this is just some of the rationale as to why staff was trying to focus on the housing trust fund as the option to help subsidize and build affordable rental housing.
I get, and having been really involved in the affordable housing, I understand and know the HTF very well. I guess my concern is 2 parts, that we had a model apply and later withdraw that included affordable rental housing. I actually think it is a great idea for cities to have these developers build it into the model right then and there. So I just think it's probably not a great initiative. That's just my personal opinion. My other concern is, have we talked to any lenders about this? So when we get into condo agreements, so we're talking about splitting a building, and Paul is on the line, I think he could probably speak to this at 360 Hilliard. We get into condo agreements, and Sandra probably knows, they have to start pre-selling. So if I'm a hotelier and I've got to condoize my building, my financing just got really complicated. And I'm not actually familiar with what would happen in a condo project. You have to pre-sell now 50% of the units. So I don't know what that means for a hotel, but we may be inadvertently creating a much harder financing option by requiring it to only be for sale. It's probably worth looking into. Sandra, you know that, right? Like, it used to be 80% pre-sale and it was reduced to 50% in recent years. And that was a big win for condos. But when building these, it's complicated.
Well, the thing is, I guess that's the reason why it's probably better to leave things the way Todd have them, the way they're set up as far as the housing trust fund, rather than creating all these separate categories, which could actually make it more difficult, for the projects indirectly. So I think that's a safer way to do it. And that way you can actually control where the money is spent through the trust, housing trust, rather than trying to make separate categories as far as the point system.
So Todd, maybe, relative to Sage's follow-up questions about development and financing, you can, spend a little time on that and maybe get back together with us.
And I only had one more thing about the rubric before I'll be quiet. I know we've got this living wages on there, and we've now got this ground floor activation. I'm thrilled to know we have. But is there any interest in doing something where it's either positive points for renting to a locally owned business or negative points if you do not rent to a locally owned business? I know it's a really gray area in the state. I'm just curious if that's an option.
You mean, Councilwoman Turner, you mean relative to the retail?
Right. So
inside?
if they're going to end up with some ground floor space because their building's more than 50% or 50 feet wide, then can we do anything to encourage those ground level stores to be local and say not Starbucks? And I know we can't define user, just use, but I'm wondering if there is somewhere in this gray area, like we've done with living wages, that we could incentivize or de-incentivize chains, either way.
I know typically if we were requiring something like this, we wouldn't be able to because of different, commerce laws, but I might defer to Brad on this one if he has any thoughts about it.
Thank you, Todd. This is potentially a complicated issue, and I think it may require a little more exploration and thought so that we can really respond specifically to that concern. But there's multiple factors that I think we would need to give some consideration before we could really provide a meaningful answer on that.
It would be helpful for the community's sake if we had some examples of how previously approved hotels would have fared through this process. I did the math on the Flatiron, and the displacement alone made it practically impossible for them to have succeeded in that application without conditional zoning. But I think it would be, we could put you through, sorry.
Definitely happy to take a look into that. I think my dog may have heard your dog barking because mine started barking too.
Mine heard somebody's.
Yeah. But yeah, absolutely. We'll definitely evaluate these other options, Sage. What I want to do is just briefly, I have 4 slides. Let's quickly go through just to kind of show and demonstrate how the updated public benefits table, the way it is today, would have applied to some real life projects. And we did this at the council work session, but we've updated these scenarios with the current public benefits table. This is an example of the Create Broadway project. If you look at the project in its entirety, some of the benefits they were recommended included 9 affordable units, which was below the minimum required to receive points for that. It included public art, but it also included demolition of 2 structures and displacement of 6 businesses. As you can see with the displacement of the businesses, it's per business, and that really, it yields a pretty significant negative points because of that. So this project would have automatically been a conditional zoning because it would have received negative 140 points under the public benefits table. Next slide, please. The next project is the Eris project. This is a large hotel located in the Central Business District. 180 points would be required. The project included a number of public benefits. If you recall, it was called the McKibben Standard at the time. Under our old table, this project would have been approved. With adjustments we've made to the table, this project would have fell just short at 170 points and would have triggered city council review unless the applicant provided additional public benefits. Next slide, please. This is the True by Hilton. So this is in one of what we call our suburban areas where 120 points would be required. In this case, the one public benefit that was being offered was transit passes for employees. This project would not have met our threshold for points and would have triggered city council review. And finally, the last project is the Residence Inn, formerly known as the Extended Stay on Biltmore Avenue. This would have required 120 points, and due to the public benefits provided and offered as part of this project, they would have exceeded that. So this project would have been accepted at a staff level instead of city council. Next slide, please. So these were the discussion points that we've already covered with the reparations fund and the affordable housing options. So I think we can move to the next slide, please. And we'll just quickly cover the last key element of our proposal related to the design review process. As a reminder, staff's proposal essentially entails consolidating the design review functions of the downtown and riverfront commissions into a new board called the Asheville Design Review Board. The existing process is shown on the left-hand side of the screen, and the proposed process is shown on the right-hand side. Under the current process, design review of projects for larger projects that occurs in the central business district and in the riverfront areas are reviewed by the design review functions of the downtown and riverfront commissions. Under the proposed process, again, we would consolidate those design review functions into the new design review board with an additional responsibility that board would review all hotels citywide. So this basically would include hotels that are located outside of the central business district and outside the riverfront areas that new design review board would also review all hotels, small and large, in all those areas of the city. We have drafted design guidelines for hotels as kind of a start for some of the criteria that we would use. I see Chairperson Whistler. Do you have a question?
We're not creating a new boards and commissions, right? No. This is going to be appointments from the downtown and the riverfront development commission will contribute a couple of their members to form this. We are not going to add a new boards and commission.
It's essentially combining committees, Gwen. So it's really a net.
Well, but that's what I'm saying, that it's not a new board and commission. It is two subsets of those two. You're not going to add new members. It isn't, if somebody's not a member of the riverfront of the downtown commission, they aren't going to be a member of the design review board.
Yeah, and
this isn't the adding, creating a new board and commission is not really the direction we want to be going in. We already have, I believe, 31,
yeah.
We are not, this is, so what we're, I'm not going to be supportive of that if we don't just make it a combination of those two subcommittees.
So I was looking at this, Gwen. So they're not combining. It looks like this is the existing, and if this is the proposed, it's actually getting rid of one board. That's the way I'm looking at it? Is it, Todd?
So as a downtown commission previous member, I can show what I know. So downtown commission reviews projects after their design review board sees them. We get their expertise, we weigh in additionally, it keeps going. Same with the riverfront. So my understanding is this is a proposal to remove design review from the riverfront commission and from the downtown commission and send them on their way doing all the other things they do, but no longer any design review. Then a new design review board would be created, and that new board would review all hotels citywide, all of downtown and all of riverfront.
Okay.
And I do have concerns. I know this isn't new either, so I'll just share it one time. I'm concerned about this. My suggestion as a solution is to create the one design review board, but then to still send the projects to the respective riverfront or downtown commission. And I want to point out that both the Riverfront Commission and the Downtown Commission were inquired about this process and both voted to not do it. And when we looked at things like the open space management, which we delayed 6 months because 2 city boards said they did not agree and they wanted it to be different, we delayed that 6 months to try. So here we are again, we've got 2 of the key boards saying, don't do this. So my, again, solution is to continue the process through them. And at this stage in hotel development, maybe another step isn't so bad.
Thank you, Councilmember Turner. That was a great explanation too of the process as well. I would just say I know we were definitely very hesitant to even recommend a new board, and understanding how many boards and commissions we have in the city, and need to evaluate that. But we felt that combining the functions of these 2 subcommittees into one body, we would still be doing the same amount of work, but we feel like we could do it more efficiently. Staff would not have recommended this change to the design review process if we felt that it would be more burdensome for the city or staff to try to manage a new board. But again, appreciate the feedback as well.
Todd, and I know a lot of this initiative probably comes from the Downtown Commission, which has a way of critiquing projects outside design when they're not supposed to. So I think some of this is also education on those boards. I've lived through several of those moments and had to chair them, and it was bad. And as a developer, I would be upset too. But I think there's still a solution there that doesn't involve retracting those powers from those 2 commissions.
We also looked at the possibility of trying to work within the confines of our current system and how this might work. What if the Downtown Commission continued to review projects in downtown and the Riverfront continued to review projects in the Riverfront? The benefit of why we were suggesting this new format was really to address hotels outside of those areas that we don't have a board that could review those. One thing we considered and we were trying to evaluate is whether an existing board like the Planning and Zoning Commission could design review in areas outside the downtown and central and riverfront areas. I think we're still evaluating to see if general statutes for the state allow us to do that. We're looking into that currently to see if that's a feasible option or not legally.
Well, I can't.
Any other
I can't
comments or feedback on this particular design review process before we move along?
I mean, well, I can't support, that basically if it's a downtown hotel, they'd have to go through 2 design reviews. I think that's inconsistent with our goals here, which is trying to make this a little more streamlined. So, I don't think that's fair to a developer to have them go through 2 completely, 2 different design reviews. So that's just my input.
I understand, Gwen. And I would say, having been on the Downtown Commission for so many years, there's an expertise and an awareness in downtown that is different than the riverfront, that is different than Haywood Road and so on. So whether or not they do a dual design review, it's at least bringing the project through those commissions for their input on impacts to the neighborhood and all the other things, I think does matter. But I'll stop now. Thanks for listening.
Great. Thanks again for the feedback on that. So just to conclude that this is our tentative project schedule, is that staff is proposing that we hold a public hearing at the Planning and Zoning Commission at their first meeting on February 3rd. And then 2 days later to kind of stay on schedule if this is to be at least reviewed by City Council before the end of the moratorium expires, that we would hold a vote by Planning and Zoning Commission possibly on Friday, February 5th. This would allow us to stay on schedule to hold a public hearing at City Council on February 9th, and then have a City Council vote on this overall recommendation on February 23rd, which is the same day that the moratorium expires.
And I would add that not on the schedule, but prior to going to planning and zoning, we would come back to you all in some form, probably not a formal meeting, but check in with each of you on what we're recommending to planning and zoning, so that you would know that before it got to planning and zoning. So that would be the last week of January that we would do that.
Are you wrapped up, Todd?
That's it. Yeah, unless there's anything further, I appreciate all the feedback, and we have a few things to look into.
Okay.
Thank you, Todd. I know I've been a heavy critic of this process the whole time, but this is the best I've felt about it thus far. So thank you. Lots of hard work went into this.
Councilwoman Kilgore, are you okay? Well, okay. Okay. All right. So we will now take public comment. Just so we know, we did not get any public comment prior to this meeting. And so we'll take public comment now. Callers will have 3 minutes to comment. Staff, do we have any live calls from public comments on this item?
There's no one in the speaker queue.
Okay. So that will conclude public comment on this particular item. And now we'll move to a general public comment. Staff, do we have anyone in the speaker queue for general public comment for PED?
We do not.
Thank you. All right. So with that, that concludes the public comment portion of the meeting, and I will adjourn this meeting. Thank you.
Everyone.
Good discussion, guys.